Welcome to the second part of this series on building a blog with Laravel and Vue.js. So this is where we left off, and today the goal is to turn this into something that actually looks like a blog. And just as a quick reminder, this is my current blog and this is what we're working towards. So we'll open our code editor and we'll open the layout file. And here we will include, right here under app, we will include layout.sidebar, and here we'll put a main and we will put the content inside of the main. So let's create our sidebar blade file, and so we'll do new folder and we'll do layout, and here we will create a new file, and it's going to be sidebar.blade.php. And here we will create an element, I think it's called aside. And okay, so let's open our app.css file and let's talk quickly about how I like to organize my CSS. So the first thing I have is usually a layout section. This is the stuff that you can see on every page usually. So it will include, the sidebar, the main content styling. Then the next part I like to have is components. So components, for now we don't have any, but this is stuff that I can reuse from one page to another, and it's usually pretty self-contained. And lastly, I will have pages. So those are page specific styles. They can override components sometimes, or just, fix the spacing on a page if I need to. So here we're still under layout. So we'll do import layout, and I'll call this file layout again because it's just a general layout between the sidebar and the main content. So let's go here under layout, let's create a file and call it layout.css. So here we have our app wrapper, and we'll set it to display flex. And here we have our sidebar, and this is going to have a background of white, and we want to give it a little bit of a box shadow here. So we'll use a variable called box shadow. So we'll open our variables file right here, so we can reuse this box shadow in different places. So we'll do box shadow. It's going to be 0, 0, 1 pixels, and then RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.15. So then we can use this in different places. We can close the variables file. So we have our box shadow. So next we can style our main content, and we can do background is going to be our light gray, which is actually slightly bluish, so light gray. And we also want to add a little bit of padding to our sidebar. So we'll do padding, and for the vertical we'll do spacing, which is 4 pixels times 18, and for the horizontal we'll do spacing times 24. And we'll do the same thing here for the main content. And okay, so we have our background, we have our padding. We do want this one to have a fixed width, so we want it to be 240 pixels of content, and then we want to account for the padding. So we'll do spacing times 48, like this. And this one should not grow, so flex grows 0 and flex shrink 0. We want it to be this size at all times. And the main here should be flex grow, so it fills up the rest of the space. Next, we'll go inside of our sidebar here, and we'll just put a little something inside so we can see that it's there. And then we'll open the browser, and if we refresh the page, you can see that we have our sidebar and our post index. Now, one thing is that it's currently getting cut short. So let's go back to the editor here and go to app.css, to go to layout. And here we'll give this one a min height of 100%. And if we refresh the browser here, you can see that now it takes up the whole page. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll start adding our content to our sidebar. So let's go back to the editor here and go inside sidebar, and we'll create a header. And I will copy paste the content from my website. There we go. And as you can see, we have an H1, which is the title with a link back to the homepage with my name. And then we have our little tagline. So let's go ahead and go back to our app.css, and we will create a new file here, and it's going to be layout sidebar, and we'll create the file now. So it's going to be sidebar.scss, And here we can start styling this. So we have our header and we have an H1 with a link inside. So the font size is going to be 1.625 rem. So this is 1.625 times 16. And if we go on the website here, you can inspect, and it's not a random number. It actually comes down to, if you go computed styles, it comes down to 26 pixels. So 1.625 times 16 is 26. So that's why we're doing this. So let's go back here and continue. So we have our font size. Next we'll set the color to black 80, and we're going to set it to display block. And when we hover over it with our mouse, we want to change the color and make it a little bit lighter to black 60. So that looks good. Next, we'll style the tagline, which is an H2. The font size is going to be 1 rem, so that's 16 pixels. The color is going to be lighter at 60, black 60. Next, we're going to have a font weight of 400, which is basically normal. Then we'll do a little bit of margin at the top. So we'll do margin top, and we'll do spacing times. So let's see here. Let's go back to the current website and see how much spacing we have in between. So we have, let's go to computer. At the top, we have 9 pixels of spacing. So let's go back here. So that's 2.25 spacing, because 2.25 times 4 is 9 pixels. So we'll save and go back to the browser. And if we refresh here, you can see that doesn't look at all like what we want it to look like. So I think I know why, and we'll just go to the terminal and just cancel and restart run watch, npm run watch, and there we go. Now it's saved and now it works. So the problem is that when you include a file inside of app.css, so I included sidebar and I saved before I created the file, it creates an error, and sometimes it doesn't recover from that error even if you do add the file later on. So that's what happened here. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go back to the sidebar, and then we'll start adding our navigation. So I will once again copy paste it from the current website. So there we go. Let's just fix the indentation here, and then we'll go over it. So I have 3 links, and they're called nav item. So we have the actual link text, and then we have a span called nav description with a little description about the link here. So it's fairly basic stuff. So let's go ahead and open our sidebar.scss and actually start styling this. So here we'll do nav, and first we want to give it a little bit of margin top. So we'll do spacing times 24 to give it a little bit of space at the top. Then we'll start styling our nav items. So nav item, and the color is going to be black 80, just like the title. And then the font family here, we need it to be serif. So we'll do noto serif and set a default. There we go, like this. And we'll set it to display block and give it a font weight of 700, which is bold. And then when you hover over it, we want to change the color to black 60. So it's the same thing as our title here. It's the same styling. Next, we want to give a little bit of space in between each element. So let's just grab it here and do plus nav item. So when there's one next to another, we'll do a margin top of spacing times 2.25. So that's 9 pixels if you remember. And then border top, we'll do 1 pixel solid, and then we'll just do black 10 for now. So that's going to be the color of our border. Sometimes I set an actual variable with just my border color. We might do that later, but for now this is fine. And then we'll do padding top of the same thing, spacing times 2.25. So next we will style the little description text underneath. So it's nav description, and we'll give it a color of black 60, just like our tagline at the top. And the font family is going to be Noto Sans. I don't know how to pronounce that really, but whatever. We'll say that's how you pronounce it. And then we also want to give it a display of block. The font size here is going to be 0.8125 rem. And that sounds like another random number, but if you do the math, it comes down to 13 pixels. So then we'll give it a little bit of margin at the top. So margin top, we'll do spacing times 1.5. So that's 6 pixels. And we'll give it a font weight of 400, which is just normal. So this looks pretty good. We'll go back to the browser and we will hit refresh. And there we go. So we can compare. We can close this here. And yeah, it's pretty similar. The line spacing here is a little bit different. So let's go check that out. So if we scroll back up here, let's set this to have, let's do line height and do line height copy. And if we go back here and we refresh, a little more spaced out, and now it's actually very similar. So there still like seems to be like a little bit of a difference, but this is good enough for me. I think I used 1.5, so we can try 1.5M like this, and now it's exactly the same. So I guess that's what I use, so we'll use that. So next up, as you can see, we have social media icons. And for those, I like to use inline SVGs. So I'll show you where I get my icons right now. And it's on GitHub, and it's called Simple Icons. So if we go here under icons, and then you can search for, search for Twitter, and it's right there. So we'll open in a new tab. And here you can see the Twitter logo. If we do raw, we can go ahead and copy this and then go back to our editor. And under views, we'll create a new folder called SVG. And we'll do a new file and we'll call it twitter.blade.php and save it. And that's really the fastest way I've found to include inline SVGs. So we'll do the same for the other social medias. So let's close all of this actually and go back to our sidebar .blade. And here we will do social nav like this. And once again, I will copy paste it in from my current website, just like that. And we'll fix the indentation again and save. So next we can go back to sidebar.scss and scroll to the bottom, and under nav we can add a social nav like this, and it's going to be display flex because we want them one next to each other, and we'll give it a little bit of a margin top again, so it's spacing times 24 is the same thing as the other navigation. And okay, so now we'll style our links. So we're going to give them a display of block, and then we'll style the actual SVG inside, and we're going to use fill black 80. So this is how you can color an SVG. You can use the fill property here, and we'll give them a width of spacing times 4, so that's 16 pixels, and a height of spacing times 4. And it's important that you specify both the width and the height because there's a bug in some versions of Internet Explorer that will make your site look all messed up if you don't. Okay, so next, if you hover over the link, the SVG should change color, so it should become black 60 like everything else. And finally, we should have a little bit of space in between each link. So we'll do margin left spacing, there we go, times 4. And if we save and we go back to the browser, you can close this. And here if we refresh, as you can see, we have all of this here, and this is a little bit small for me. So let's go back right here and maybe change this to 6. So that's 24 pixels. And if we refresh, there we go, that looks more like it. So let's compare, and we can add a little bit more space in between as well. So let's go back here and do the same spacing actually, times 6. And if we refresh, okay, so this looks pretty good to me. Okay, so that's great, we've done this. One thing also I wanted to do that I've noticed in the previous episode is, let me check, I made a small little mistake here under, I think, layout, html.css, and I forgot to add, there we go. So when we hover a link, we want transition, all, and we want this, 0.5 seconds. So we can close this now. So if we go back to the browser now and we refresh the page, it should be a little like smoother. I don't know if you can really tell anything, but it should be a little smoother, the color transition. So next we'll add some content on the right so we can style it. And those will be post excerpts because we don't want to have the whole post on the index. So next we'll open our index file and we'll get rid of this and we'll create a container called articles, I guess. That's good enough. And inside we'll just put an article and we'll give it a class of post excerpt like this. So our post needs to have a title. It's going to be a link. There we go, a link. And for now, it's not going to link anywhere really. And we're going to give it a title. So we're going to say post title like this. And let's give it a class here of, let's do class is title. Underneath it, we'll do a class of excerpt. So that's going to be the actual content here. And for that, we will just grab some lorem ipsum and we'll paste it in like this. There we go. Next, we need to have a read more button. So we'll do a link. And for now, it's not going to link anywhere again. And we'll give it a class of read more. And it's going to say read more. Perfect. So next, we'll go back to app.scss and it's going to be our first component. So we'll do import components and it's going to be post excerpt. So this is pretty much self-contained. We can reuse it on other pages if we want. So under Sass, we'll create a new folder called components. There we go. And we'll create a new file and we'll save it as post excerpt.scss. There we go. So let's create a selector. And now the first thing we can do is give it a background of white. And let's give it also some padding. So we'll do spacing times 18 here. And spacing times 24 for the horizontal. And we'll give it, let's see, we need a box shadow. So we'll do box shadow. So it's the same everywhere. And we can give it a border radius and we'll do border radius as a variable. And we'll go ahead and add this one so we can also have the same one consistently everywhere if we need border radius. So let's do border radius and it's going to be 2 pixels. Next, we can style the title. So we'll give it a font family of serif. So like this. I could probably save those under a variable too. So let's actually do that right now and just do font serif and go to our variables.scss and do like this font serif and like this and font sans and do like this and then okay, so this is gonna be a little bit easier I think to use and we can go back and change it in the other files as well and we'll do that later. So back to our title, we can do font size of 2.25 rem and once again you can do the math and we can do a display block and we want to give it a little bit of margin bottom, so we'll do margin bottom, let's do spacing times 12. And because it is a link, we'll just target the actual link here and we'll do color, which is going to be black 80. And when you hover, we want to do color black 60. So that's it for the title, I think. So let's move on to the actual content. So excerpt like this. And first thing we'll set once again the font family. So we'll do a font serif. And next we'll do the font size. It's going to be 1.125 rem. Next we'll do a color. It's going to be black 80. And we're going to give it a line height of line height copy so it's easier to read. So I think that's good for that. It's already a div, so we don't need to do display block. Perfect. So let's do read more now. So read more is a link, so it's going to display as inline block like this. It's going to have a font weight of 700 because we want it to be bold and a font size of 1.125 rem, just like the text. The last thing we want to add is a little bit of margin top, so we'll do spacing times 6 here. And we can go back to the browser and if we can close this and if we refresh here, this looks pretty good to me. So let's compare. So this is pretty similar. This looks fine. Now one thing, let's say we go back to the post index and we will just go ahead and grab this and copy it, let's say like 3 times, and do here another title and one more title. So we have 3 posts now, and if we refresh, they're all stuck to one another. So I don't really want that. So we'll go back to the editor here, and this is going to be part of, let's go open app.css, and this is going to be part of the page styling. So I don't want to add this to the post component. To me, this is part of the page styling. So let's do pages and do post index, and I will go ahead and create that here. So under SAS, we'll do new folder and we'll do pages, and I'm going to new file, and it's going to be post index.css. There we go. And I'm going to target it like this, post index. So for this to work, we need to go back to our file here, our post index, and create a new section, and we're going to call it body ID, and it's going to be post index. So that's going to put in the ID of the body, and here we can save. And okay, so when we have 2 post excerpt on top next to one another, so post excerpt like this, we want to give it a margin top of spacing times 24. So let's save, and we go back to the browser and we refresh, and this looks pretty good to me. So this will conclude today's video. In the next episode, we'll look at how we can make the sidebar stay sticky to the left, because if I scroll down here, you can see that the sidebar disappears, while on the real website, if I scroll down, it always stays present on the left. So that's what we'll be working on in the next episode. So if you've enjoyed the video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next episode.